Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today. My name is Danny Trice. I am the Director for Alumni Engagement for the School of Social Work. We're really excited to have everyone out tonight for our incredible panel to talk about practicing policy in polarized times. I know that each one of us is looking forward to getting something from this panel tonight. First, I would like to acknowledge the fund that has brought this program to you, which is the C. Bernard Scotch Fund. This program, the Social Work Policy and Politics program, is an annual event that we've done for a number of years now as a way of promoting the importance of macro social work. And at this time, I would like to call up Dean Gary Cuddyback.
I'm not going to use the mic. I'm so excited to see. Gotta use the mic. I'm so excited to see everybody tonight. Thank you for our panelists. This is terrific, and thank you everybody for engaging. I'm super excited about our macro initiative. Kimberly Compton and Alex Wagaman are leading that, and this is really important to the school. I can't think of a time when we need macro social work any more than we need it now. And I tease with Dr. Compton that I'd really like to quadruple the number of students in our macro program, which will jack us up to 45, maybe 60. But there's such a need for it, and I really want to emphasize it as a school of social work, and we've got lots of wonderful alumni and emeriti in our community who are ready to engage. Our macro fellows program has been a big hit. We've done that 2 years ago now. So if you want to learn more about that, please talk to Dr. Compton to learn more. We're refreshing our macro curriculum. Is that done?
Done.
You finished?
Done and piloted.
Did that, piloted it. So it's really an important initiative at the school, along with other exciting things we've got going on around mental health and international social work. Dual degree programs is a big thing. Child welfare is big for us. So it's an exciting time for VCU. School, we've got 1,300 students now, and I know we've got a number of alumni that are probably shocked at that number. We've got online B.S.W, residential B.S.W, online M.S.W, residential in our PhD program. So I'm super thrilled to be here. We've launched our comprehensive campaign, which is really exciting for VCU. In total, VCU is trying to raise $1.38 billion, which we're actually on track to do that. We've already raised close to 1.3 billion. So really an exciting time of innovation and growth for the university, and social work as well. So thank you for being here. Did I cover all the bases? And if I haven't engaged with you or you haven't reached out to me, I'd love to talk with you and get to know you better, especially if you recently graduated. I'd love to get you plugged in and adjunct teaching for us and maybe field instructing. So if you haven't thought of those things, I'm putting in a shameless plug because we always need high quality folks, and I really do as Dean want to be connected to our communities and connected to all of you. So thank you very much for coming, and then
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Kimberly Compton, and I'm a professor here at the School of Social Work as well as the Director of Macro Initiatives, which has been alluded to a couple of times by Gary. And it's such a pleasure to be here and to enjoy this panel and be with all of you, all macro enthusiasts and healers and builders and creators of change, and it's so great to be alongside you. I'm especially excited to hear from our panelists as we think about this question of how we navigate change in the world as it is and in the context as it is in this current moment. And this is something I come up often in my practice, in higher education, in teaching students how to be macro practitioners now. There's a real need for deep dialogue across differences, and for new ways of being and new and fresh perspectives on how we practice in these times. It's also something, like I said, our students are talking about, and they are excited but also a bit nervous about how to navigate change in a world that feels increasingly polarized. So thank you all for being here and engaging in this conversation. And I also want to extend a sincere thank you to our panelists for being here. As alumni, each of you all have demonstrated what it means to be continually engaged in the lives of our students and in our schools. Each of you, our students talk about in different capacities because you show up in different capacities in their lives. So thank you all for continuing to be engaged. The folks up here represent our field faculty who are instructing students in their practicums in the classrooms. Y'all are mentors. Also, two of you all are macro fellows in our macro fellowship program, and y'all are community practitioners working on projects closely alongside us here at B.S.W. They're actively engaged and making our school an even better place to be, so thank you all so much for being here. Again, I'm Kimberly Compton, and as the Director of Macro Initiatives, my goal is really to increase the visibility, vibrancy, and impact of macro social work education here at the School of Social Work, but also in our broader community. And so if you're interested in getting more involved in the lives of our students and in our school, I'd love to talk with you after this event. With that, thank you again, and thank you, Dania, for bringing this together.
And now the time that you've all been waiting for, our panelists. And before we dive in, I do want to invite you all to be thoughtful about the conversation. Consider this a safe space. We are recording the panel portion of this event, and then we will be deactivating the recording when it's time for Q&A. So please do make this a space that you are free to engage with. So first, I would like to transition over to our panel. So we have 4 amazing B.S.W. alumni joining us today. Let's see if our mic is going to continue to work for us. There we go. There we go. So we have with us today Maryn Campbell, who is a B.S.W. and an M.S.W. graduate of B.S.W. We also have Stephanie Lynch, who is a 2010 B.S. graduate and a 2013 graduate of B.S.W. And then we also have Erin Trimmer. So the slide says something different, and I apologize for that. But we have Erin Trimmer here today on our panel as well. And I would like to turn it over to Allison Gilbreath. She will serve as our moderator today. Allison is a 2011 Bachelor's of Science graduate and a 2016 Master's of Social Work graduate of B.S.W. She is the Senior Director of Policy and Programs at Voices for Virginia's Children. She leads the organization's child welfare policy work as well as the implementation of advocacy programs, elevating policy conversations across all policy areas. Allison created Voices Foster Care Policy Network, which is a group comprised of partners, direct service providers, families, and youth who create and foster a unified agenda for each year. She also helped to create the first ever bipartisan foster care caucus with the Virginia General Assembly. Together with the Work, Network, and Foster Care Caucus, she successfully led the charge in creating the Kinship Financial Assistance Program during the 2020 General Assembly session. At this time, I will turn it over to Allison to guide our conversation for today.
as of a couple of months ago, I do early childhood education policy, but that's actually very typical of macro social work. We are constantly switching our subject matter expertise. Really grateful to be here with you. I'll be moderating the conversation with this amazing panel. The first thing I would like the panel to do is to tell us about yourself, including your experience in social work, and let's go Maryn down. And then for the next several questions is whoever the spirit catches you.
Okay.
Hello.
So I graduated from B.S.W with my B.S.W in 2018, and then I went on to do my M.S.W and graduated in 2020. I chose to do the 2-year program because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do micro or macro, and I'm glad that I did that because I was able to then really learn about what macro social work was. And I was placed in the General Assembly, was under Jennifer McClellan, and got hands-on experience in the General Assembly and decided to stay with her up until recently when we were in the House, and then I left Congress to join the Legal Aid Justice Center. So my whole entire experience has been shaped by my social work degrees and just seeing how the systems and policy work with community organizing on different levels, from the state level up to the federal level. So that has led to my experience here.
I think you can put it up. Hi, I'm Erin, not Helen. And I'm twice over BCU grad. I got my Bachelor's of Interdisciplinary Studies in 2022, and then my M.S.W just last year in 2025. So I'm a relatively young social worker in that respect, but I knew when I went into the M.S.W program that I wanted to go into macro. I wanted to be involved in policy and in those discussions from the jump. And I was fortunate enough in my specialization year to be placed in internship with Virginia Organizing, which gave me the community organizing piece that really kind of unlocked how I sort of interacted with policy and kind of gave me a direction that I fell in love with. And so since graduating, I am a community organizer. I do housing work. Within that, I've been Stephanie several times. And most recently, I worked as a legislative session aide for Delegate Ray Cousins for this past General Assembly session.
I remember seeing you there.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie Lynch. I am a, yes, 2010. I'm glad you had the numbers up there, because I actually forgot that. 2010, graduated BCU, got my degree in biopsych, women's studies, which is now gender studies, and African American studies. B.S.W. And when I came out, I actually did direct practice. So I was a QMHP and worked in a career adult technical institute and had a caseload of 550 students. And so I had a caseload of 552 students, and so I was the only one. And I actually had four clients pass away on me, and it was a horrific and tragic experience, but I also got really angry and wanted to go change the system. So I found the M.S.W program, and specifically going the macro route, the most effective way to make impactful change. I can't believe I remember you. So nice to see you. Susan Pulaski, and they have macro class that year. And so when I came out, I was fortunate enough to work at the Virginia Department of Social Services, and so did a lot of policy work to thank Commissioner Paul Quinney, and then worked at the governor's office doing Affordable Care Act implementation, aka Obamacare, and then served as a representative for the Medicaid managed care plans and worked in the Medicaid side of the house for a number of years, and was the lobbyist and the bullseye and all the things that came along with doing that job, and was able to advocate for the thing I was really passionate about at the time, was Medicaid expansion. And so got to be one of the key lobbyists that worked alongside other advocates and legislators to expand the Medicaid program, and during that time also did the addiction recovery treatment services program, brought that to bear, all the funding and program that came with that. Since now have 3 jobs and work for one of the largest Medicaid providers in the country called Savita. We're in 44 states. We do services, Medicaid services cradle to grave, including therapeutic foster care, behavioral health, autism services, developmental disability services, brain injury, whole host and variety of Medicaid funded services. I also sit as the executive director of Virginia's Kids Belong, and you get to watch this lovely woman's work in action. And Virginia PKB is a statewide nonprofit that serves children and families in that are child welfare involved. Specifically, we work to find permanent homes for kiddos who are up for adoption. And thirdly, I sit on City Council for the City of Richmond as the 5th District City Council person. And in my role there, I'm the chair of the Education and Human Services Committee and focus a lot on homeless services, our own Department of Social Services, and just kind of working to improve the experience for Richmonders in the marginalized communities that we serve. So that's a little about me.
But so interesting. Okay, here we go. I think what's so interesting about what all of you said is one of the things that I hear a lot from students who are thinking about going back road, that they're worried they're not going to find a job. And I think I just heard you say about 10 jobs.
So many I know what to do with it.
Exactly. It's so interesting because I have never had a student not be able to find a job. If anything, it's more like there are so few macro social work students that they have a variety of opportunities when they do finish. In fact, there's not enough to fill the needs, just in the Richmond region alone, thinking about the entire state. But going back to why we're here, we're here because there's a deep political polarization in our country, certainly. And I'm curious, what does it mean to you all to practice social work under this current deep political polarization? And how is that showing up in your work? Whoever would like to jump in. Go for it. Go for it.
I'm coming fresh off the hills. Jasmine was with me to a visit on the Hill in DC. So here in Virginia, we get to enjoy, and I'm just assuming most of the social workers probably lean towards the progressive side of policy and policymaking. Here in Virginia, we get to enjoy a fairly progressive legislature. And, a little bit of a blue A. It's not a North Belton. But having to travel and up north and interact and talk with and really advocate with the Trump administration and the folks who are leading the war on fraud, with the legislators, both U.S. Senate and congressional offices who are kind of implementing some of the less savory parts of what we would call the OBVA or the Big Beautiful Bill or the Big Ugly Bill, really just on totally different sides of the fence. I think philosophically than where our traditional sexual work values fall. It was a very, I still have, I always have cognitive dissonance since we have seen the Trump administration in action. And so, we still have a job to do, which is to advocate for our populations and our people. And, Jasmine, I think you can probably bear witness to this. I have to switch the whole language in which I talk. And that's tough. And it sounds disingenuous, and it may sound to you all like, whoa, you have to change who you are. I'm not changing who I am at the core, but my messaging and the way that I talk about things and why I'm making that argument has to change because of the audience that I'm sitting in front of. And that rubs against my core values as a social worker. But in order to be the best advocate for ultimately to get the ball across the finish line, which is don't cut our funding, for the love of God, do not block grant funding to the states. Do not wreak havoc on the most vulnerable children and families in the country who are on our Medicaid programs. We have to learn how to adapt our advocacy and our language to be effective. And that's a cognitive dissonance that that I find myself struggling with.
Yeah, Maryn or Erin? I'm gonna put it like
You can pick up on that.
If I can.
Yeah.
There you go. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes.
So I want to piggyback on that, but I want to make sure. Also, I have mom brain, so I'm going to try my best to answer cohesively.
I understand that. It's really nice not to have mom brain, but now having had it for many years, my daughter's almost turning 5, it's just firing on again. So it's really good. You will get there. There's
Just follow along.
But going back to polarization and just talking about, we're in this political climate that's very polarized, and how is that showing up for you in your work?
Okay, yes. So to piggyback on what Stephanie's saying, I definitely find myself changing the language that I use and the messaging. And so I'm gonna go back on my experience in the House. So I wasn't on the policy team when we were in the House, I was on the outreach side, but we were still sitting in meetings with constituents, and meeting with like local elected and state elected, and then also I just came off the General Assembly session where we were meeting with everybody. And I think a lot of what social workers we do, we meet people where they are, but also we're able to read the room and understand the importance of framing, because in like polarized times, your message and what you're trying to achieve is going to be filtered through a political lens before it is filtered through the merit of what you're saying. And so before you even walk into a room with a legislator or a group of constituent or whoever, you have to know, how am I going to spin this or frame this in order to get what we want across? Because if we don't do it right, there's not going to be enough time to sit down and educate who you're talking to on the actual merit. They're going to likely have their mind made up already, and so it's important to come in there with the correct or whatever is going to be received to get your message across. And that always feels kind of icky, I would say. But I think it's an important skill to have, and I think it's a skill that being a macro social worker teaches you, because you learn how different orgs work and what language works within each org. And I feel like that is, an important role that I've been able to take on in these past couple of years, and that the social work school has taught me how to do.
I just wanted to, I have the same question, but I might just do this.
Or can we be heard without the microphones?
Probably not.
They're recording.
They're recording too. So Erin, very similar question, but I want to get a little bit of a different take from you, because you just left the Virginia General Assembly. You were out there every day, probably working 100 hours a week. But we're under a Democratic trifecta currently. So I'm curious what your experience under that this new system in Virginia that we have, and reflecting on both the federal level and the state level. I have thoughts, but I want to hear yours first.
Cool, super casual question, love this, okay. So yeah, this was my first session working in the General Assembly. I was in there last year as an intern and as an organizer, and it is a different language, it's a different way of communication, it's a different strategy that you are kind of undertaking once you go into the room. And I think for me, there was a bit of a learning curve to the fact that we have a trifecta and we are, have the ability to sort of make these big policy decisions that are potentially kind of shoring up what cuts are happening at the federal level, what sort of chaos is happening at the federal level. And there was a little bit of, I think maybe a reality check, where it was the realization that even if we have all three, the Senate, the House, the governor, we're still, a blue party is not a monolith, and there is still so much divided in between that. And so getting things done was really a lot of conversation, a lot of relational, talking to people and meeting people where they're at, and also kind kind of trying to remember that everybody is coming in with the intention of trying to make the best case and make a change that they really believe in, for the most part, and trying to keep that in mind even when you're like, you are nuts, what are you doing here? So.
That's really important. I think I've been under 2 Democratic trifectas, and I think I told my staff at the beginning of session, like, let's not get our hopes too much up, because you could be really heartbroken and it's hard. But they still have to face the same budget realities. I mean, we were going into this General Assembly budget with almost $1 billion shortfall because of HR 1. So what happens at the federal level really impacted what you all saw at the state level. But for the general public, I think the challenge for us as social workers is how do we explain that to our communities? You know, that's one of the skills that's really important for macro social workers too, because we're up here doing the policy work. If we're not communicating back and up, it can really make it seem like people can become very apathetic very quickly. So, you know, just thinking about the policy landscape of today, what feels most different from when you first entered the field or were a newer alumni, and what feels most surprising as you began your career? I know, that's a lot.
I'm gonna jump in and just answer it since I don't have a comparative.
Okay.
But for me, like the most surprising thing was finding those pockets of kind of bipartisan agreement where you wouldn't think that they would exist. Like there's a really deep relationship between, for like criminal justice reform work, between like deep Southwestern Republicans and more like city people, because that like those like criminal justice issues have deeply affected both of those communities in very like similar ways. And so those like bridges are being made in a way that I was like not expecting, and it was really cool to see those people who would normally be kind of at odds consistently working together to make these like really good sweeping changes.
I'm really looking at my Maryn's face. Go ahead, jump in.
No. I think that's a really good point, and I agree with that. I was thinking more so of, like being at the General Assembly and then stepping away just for like 3 years, to go to the federal level and coming back. Maybe I've just been jaded, I don't know. But I feel like social media has really heightened the noise and like the tension, and like there's definitely like an element of people working across the aisle, but I feel like now people don't want to be seen doing that.
Yes.
And I think it's because if that is plastered all over the place, people chop it up to you being performative. And like I know we've all seen the memes of like, I think it was like Obama and Bush like somewhere talking, and people were like really outraged by that. And they were like, I'm gonna say this wrong, it was like, they're the same feather out the birds, or the same.
Yeah, yes they are.
You know, yes, that's it. Yes, yeah. And people get really outraged by that, and so I think there's a lot, but like there's issues where both sides of the aisle really are trying to fight for the same thing. But those conversations are not happening on the floor in committee, they're happening behind closed doors, because you are trying to get someone to just vote with what they know is right, and they won't necessarily do that because of party lines, just like how polarized we are. And so it's still a lot of relationship building, but it's behind closed doors now, and that's really different than I think before, when that was like some sort of like, there's a level of pride to that, of like working across the aisle, and now it feels like we shame that, and that's like a hard thing to overcome, but I know that it's still happening. And so like, I do have like, I know a bunch of like Republicans that like we work with a lot on criminal like, justice reform, and like they're really passionate about it, but then like on the floor sometimes they may just like take a walk or like vote on the party line, and it's like, you know, that's not how they really feel. And so that's something that is, I think, maybe being worked on, but it's just interesting to see that happening.
Stephanie, I want to ask you very similar, because I think policy about the same amount of time.
It's like 18th session.
Yes, and I think it's my 15th, but I remember when we were, part of the legislative process is you go out to bars because you just need to, okay? So I remember going out to bars with legislative aides that were for Republicans, Democrats, whatever, and we all had a great time, we kikied, and I don't see that anymore. I see very much like, we can't even go to happy hour together. So I'm curious, from your perspective, are you seeing that change too, and how's it showing up?
Yeah, well first, I rarely go to bars anymore, but I also need to, so, I think that, that's a great point. I mean, when we were, when I came, my first session, we had 34 Democrats in the House, so we were in the super minority, but it didn't, we had this thing called like the Virginia way, you know?
Yes.
And it is this principle that no matter what, we're here to do good policy. And trust me, we didn't always pass good policy, okay? But there is a kind of an understanding that somehow, some way, we would meet in the middle and come to a consensus and an agreement, and it would be genteel and civilized, and there would be somewhat, thank you so much, there would be room for dialogue and discussion. Now, everyone is about the soundbite, and they get up and and this is not just here in this capital, I can tell you, it's across all 44 capitals that I work in, probably all 50 states. Here, we are doing the soundbite opportunity, and we are using floor speeches and moments to go viral, to get more clicks, to get our name out there, to get more name ID out there. And it is so much more about the person than it is, and the personality and the ego that is that elected official than it is the policy. And that's where I think we are really getting ourselves askew and haywire, and it becomes quite insidious. And then that leads to this feeling of we're all on separate teams. And the teammanship, the Virginia way is a somewhat controversial statement now, but that was a model that allowed for people just to like put it all to bed at the end of the day, go out and have a good time with each other. Now it is the spice level has just risen to a point where we're not doing that, and that's really harmful in our democracy.
Totally agree with what you all say. It's changed the way I show up on social media, actually. I don't post a lot of my personal life. I think none of us do, because people are weird and they'll screenshot it, and just very strange things that I think didn't exist outside of these polarized times. And I think the utilization of things like TikTok and quick sound bites are heightening awareness, but also unnecessary stress. And I also, and I'm sure you all see the same thing, the folks that are often the most clickable online are usually not the best lawmakers. In fact, it's usually the opposite. So sometimes when I'm at the dinner table, they're like, did you see what so-and-so said online? I'm like, they're the worst. But they're charismatic, they're great speakers, not necessarily great policymakers. And it's usually those of us who are in the background who ask us in private will tell you who the best folks are who do the best work. But speaking of that, I'm thinking about the challenges. What I've also seen in polarizing times is I do see opportunities for bridge building, for collaboration that might not be obvious at first glance. I've sort of seen in my work partners that I maybe not necessarily would have worked with before. We're like, we have to work together if we want to get this done. So I'm curious if you all are seeing like opportunities for bridge building under these times.
Stephanie, I really should give this to you, because I'm going to say local government. I think that local government is such an underrated tool for bridge building, because it's like, you're going to see them at the grocery store, you're going to see them at your kids' PTA meeting, you're going to see them at the library. And so I feel like things are not as polarized because you're in community with these people. And it really is like, I mean, the city of Richmond is about to do their budget, and so it's like, don't ask me what budget right now. But it is a really start to like really understand the things that are happening on that affect you on a day-to-day basis, and a way to like, I mean, learn really with how the state system works and the federal level works, but also to build these coalitions and organize with your neighbors, and like your local electeds. And I think that we need to get more involved in our local government, because that's where you're gonna see the most immediate, the most impactful change. Because, I mean, there are so many bills in Congress that are just never going to make it to the floor. Like they have been sitting there for years, and they will never make it to the floor. So, like, not to dismiss the important work of the federal level, because we see it's impacting us and people all across the nation, but if, like, immediate stuff is really, like, the local level, and I think you can build a lot of coalition and bridges there. So, that's my shout out to the local government.
Well, thanks, Mary. I'm being facetious. I really think that is such an incredibly powerful point, and welcome my social worker brethren to help in this fight, bring attention to the issues that are so critical that we can impact at the local level. I'll give you just 3 quick examples, and if you want to know more, please contact me after this, because I'll put your work. We have a public housing leadership and structure that does not work for its public housing residents. They have tried to raise Gilpin. We fought really hard on that, and actually Senator Congresswoman McClellan's office helped us quite a bit on that issue. The SNAP eligibility issue, we have an eligibility office in our local Department of Social Service. That is fantastic. It's not a knock on any one eligibility worker or the DSS organization as a whole, but we have to do better for our people. There are people that go without Medicaid, without SNAP, without TANF because they're not getting their eligibility renewed quickly enough. We need a high-performing DSS to serve that's what they deserve, is full stop. That's what our people deserve. So help on that issue would be awesome. And then thirdly, we are still fighting the good fight on homelessness and homelessness services. We still do not have a walkout shelter for families and children, y'all. That means that every single winter and all year round, those families are having to rely on piecemeal it together to find themselves hotel rooms and get various nonprofits and sometimes the city to fund their hotel rooms or hotel stays or wherever they need to, but they're not making do very well at all. And those are just 3 real world, tangible, like boots on the ground examples of ways that, if involved and if we asked the social work collective voice on some of those issues, I think we would really be able to move the needle. But sometimes it does feel like you're screaming into the wind. So I need more social worker voices with me for sure on those things.
Yeah, I'll just kind of echo what everybody else said, because I think like the community level is where you're going to feel the most impact, is where you're going to be able to do the most, and being able to last year get the residential rental inspection program across the finish line.
Finally did it.
Yeah, Stephanie started that, and that was what I worked on in my internship for my specialization year, and seeing that get pushed across the finish line last fall after like 3 or 4 years of consistent advocacy, consistent community input, organizing across like multiple organizations and people, and that is something that will impact folks who rent, who have unsafe homes, who have like unsafe emergency situations. Like it will kind of keep people in their homes, keep their homes healthy, keep their homes safe, and that's immediate impact. That is something that was accomplished just from sheer stubbornness and social workers getting together and pushing it through. So like dig into the community.
So we have some students here, those that will be watching later. What emerging skills do you think social workers entering the field today under political polarization, but also unified government in Virginia, what skills do you think that macro social work practitioners need today?
I gotta go.
Yeah. You got a lot.
Listen more. I mean, I think a lot of us, so there's like 3 stages of, advocacy, right? The first is activism. activism, there is a space for consciousness raising, no question. There's a space for getting on your keyboard and tweeting stuff out. But the space where you actually have to sit down with policymakers and make change and work within the system, if you're doing that type of work, that is we have to really meet people where they are. And I've had a number of macro students and folks come in as either not always in an official internship capacity, but they may work for organizations, and that's where I think our generation, our newer generation of social workers is really having the highest learning curve, is kind of getting that the rhythm of when to listen and getting, that adapting to the room and meeting people where they are in the room, getting that kind of skill set.
Yep, go ahead. Okay, yes, that is like, I think that's like the number one. Is like, I guess it's like a twofold thing, like being able to read the room. And that, I don't know how you teach that, but I think that you have to know, like, okay, I'm to listen right now, this is what I can give my input, or maybe I have thoughts, but maybe I don't need to share them right now. That is something that I think is often overlooked, but I think is like maybe a superpower in social workers, because I think you are in so many different situations that you just kind of innately start to develop that. I think also understanding, maybe there's a disconnect between theory and lived experience, and they go hand in hand, but you cannot put the theory of something over someone's lived experience. And this goes back to my point of like social media. We have a lot of people, I think with the younger generation of like really like harping on theory, but not necessarily considering the lived experience of people. And I think we need to maybe get back to that and like interacting with our communities and seeing what they need versus like trying to just implement different theories. And then I would also say, not abandoning jargon, but being able, like we do a lot of work at LAJC of translating legalese into like everyday talk for folks, because it can be a lot to parse through. Like if you ever spend through the General Assembly, half the time it feels like they're talking a different language. And I think that's intentional, right? To like cut people out so like your everyday person doesn't engage in systemic change, because it's like hard to understand like what is happening. And I think just being able to like understand a point and just like talk about it however you, like you're talking to your friends is a really important skill. And like that code switching is something that like is going to be important for this next generation of macro social workers. And then I also just go back to like listening.
Yeah, just to give a very practical, what you said about reading the room, with respect to neurodivergence, because I have 2 neurodivergent children, and sometimes my son cannot read the room. One thing that I have given as a practice to all of my interns is for the first month, I'm like, you're gonna bring your notepad and you're gonna write your intrusive thoughts. You're gonna write down what you're wanting to say, but you're not gonna say it. And what you're gonna do is either right after the meeting or in supervision, tell me all your intrusive thoughts. And then I can say, I would not have said that out loud, or yes, that would have been appropriate to ask, because it's hard. You might never have learned that skill for whatever reason, but also there are power dynamics at play. Sometimes we have to just say what it is. I've had a student come and meet with me at the governor's office, and I would say, I value everything you say, but you have to shut up. You cannot say anything. And that was really hard for them. I understood, but just that practical of like, write your intrusive thoughts down, write them. And especially if they're like, was that racist? Yes, but we're not gonna say it. I'm gonna say it because I have the power. You don't say it because I don't want you to ruin your career, right? Like, things like that. It's hard and it takes time. Erin, I'd love to hear from you.
I concur with most of like all of that, and I just want to add practice your neutral face, because I don't have one, and it has been a challenge to like, you can't put everything on your face. You have to have a neutral face, because people are coming, they're talking to people, everything shows on your face. Just practice your neutral face. It's better for everybody.
And as someone who's recently hired some new folks they're starting in June because they're recent grads, writing, you write constantly for the program, but my gosh, we write constantly as macro social workers. Maryn, do you want to jump in there?
I was gonna say, don't sit in front of the General Assembly live stream. Like, during committee meetings, sit to the left or the right. Don't sit in the middle because your face will be forever on the Virginia LIS webpage. Don't want that.
And you'll get lots of text messages like, girl, why are you looking like that? And I'm like, well, I was responding to a text. I wasn't responding to what they were saying on the screen. But people aren't gonna know. So yeah, those are all really important skills. And, thinking about it from, actually I'm gonna go to the next question. I was just gonna say, we work in an intergenerational space from people from many different generations. And I think what's important to name, and Stephanie, I imagine you see this a lot too, is what is trending or in for language for you might not be trending and in for language for others. And sometimes I think like in the want for macro social workers to be politically correct, we're just confusing some older folks. Like they don't know what we're talking about. So I've had to actually do a lot of relearning with that, because they're like, I don't know what that means. And I'm like, well, I have exactly. I'm like, oh, right, because why would you know what that next means? I have to explain it. So I think that's important too, that like what we learned in school, the community's like, that's not how we talk. And so meeting people where they're at. But I want to look ahead, considering we're in polarizing times and also disappointing times for what we want for our communities and our state. What's giving you hope right now as macro social workers? What's giving you hope for the future? And what advice would you offer to those entering the field in these polarizing times?
I have had a lot of students come up to me at the General Assembly this year asking about macro social work. That's great. Like I think I have like 4 or 5 business cards from students, and they are they're there because they're interning with someone, or I think someone was like the director of governmental affairs. So I'm just like very excited that we have a new wave of macro social workers interested in being at the General Assembly and making change. In terms of advice, I mean, like find a hobby that is not this.
Yes.
I think that is really important. I have seen a lot of folks who spend a lot of their time in like the General Assembly or in politics, and then their hobby is also politics, and that leads to burnout very quickly. And I think that is a noble endeavor, but I think maybe something that you can like turn off your critical thinking brain and just like
Sleeker lives, Mormon wives, whatever it is.
yeah, like whatever it is, like I think that's really important to have. I know it's such a cliche thing to say, especially when you're like, the world is crumbling outside, like this is so ridiculous. Like it's not, it's really important. Like there's still value in just finding joy in what could be perceived as trivial. I don't think it's trivial, but knitting for the sake of knitting and not trying to start an Etsy shop, I think is important.
That's Erin. That's what you're from you.
I think what's giving me hope is the amount of people who are, I think we're seeing a lot more community involvement. We're seeing a lot more mutual aid work. We're seeing a lot of people coming together to support each other because they see, sort of that the social safety net is crumbling, and their neighbors are maybe disappearing. There's a lot of community work that's being done, and a lot of bridges and like relationships that are being built in that way. And I find that really hopeful because I think that is how we are going to continue to push forward. And I think my advice would be to find your community and figure out how to get in and start doing that work with them. Not as your hobby, but as as a place where you are, as a side quest, as a place where you're finding your community, you're making those connections, and you are strengthening those around you.
What's giving me hope today is, politics is like this crazy, intergalactic force that may cause or impact the government. But what gives me hope is that there are people, hug a government worker, there are really, really good people at the local level, working behind the scenes at DLS, at Department of Legislative Services, working in our state government, our federal government, that are working tirelessly day in and day out through all full stuff. And these people are smart. They are always undervalued, always in a thankless role, and largely not celebrated. We don't really celebrate government or public service anymore like we used to, but they still keep doing the work. And I'll tell you all, I mean, having been, working on the Hill, working on in other state capitals, to see that the wheels of government and good people are still there, minding the store and keeping the train on the tracks, it gives me a lot of great hope that we have some ability to mitigate the craziness that is coming out of the intergalactic political storm that is before us.
That's so true, and I think for me what's giving me hope are several things. Knowing that there are 1,300 students enrolled in the BCU M.S.W program, that's really important because I think about the people who are going to care for my family and my mom as she ages, and all the systems that are needed to support our aging population, which is going to be a tremendous need pretty soon. And the oddly enough, I'm really excited about the salaries increasing in social work. They're not where I would like them to be, but I clicked on a couple of things that was like M.S.W preferred, and I was like, hey, we're over 100,000 on some of these. That's really important because that creates sustainability for the field. It's very expensive to live right now, and I'm really grateful to see that the local nonprofits and some of the bigger nonprofits are responding and recognizing the special skills that the folks on this panel really have. Many of us serve in capacities where I don't think anyone else could do our roles, because we have such unique skills, abilities, and we're able to read the room, to recognize when families need things, to speak to communities in their language, and that's what's really giving me a lot of hope. And I know that, somebody else is gonna come behind me and finish the race because of the programs that are in place right now. And so